Hi, welcome back to Mom and Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. On this episode of Behind the Sessions, I want to talk about something that comes up a lot in therapy, and that is this comparison game and the comparison trap that so many of you, so many of us uh, engage in, especially when it comes to social media, but also just in general, this idea that everybody else has their shit together and somehow you don't. No need to keep the suspense. I'm going to lead with the lead is that nobody has their shit all together all the time. And I know that for some of you out there, that is really hard to believe, but it is actually the truth. There may be, I'll give it to the like maybe 1% of people who feels like they have it together all the time. Sure, I'll give it to them. I'm sure somebody like that exists. Um, but they possibly exist in that way with a lot of resources, a lot of support, maybe a lot of money. I don't know. I'm sure it exists, but it's not the case for most people. There is a pervasive non truth out there that somehow other people are able to do everything that they want to do on their to do list, show up as this parent who is ever loving and always patient and always has the right thing to say to their child and makes all the right decisions. I don't know where or how this myth started, but it has really got a hold on all of us. And unfortunately, we as people, we as moms, we as parents, but especially new parents, are particularly vulnerable to this. So there are a lot of different things that can contribute to this sense, this feeling of other people doing better than you. And while your journey might include stuff that you haven't yet uncovered as to the reasons why, like it could have been something that developed in your family system or in school or through sports or extracurricular activities or whatever, any number of things or all of the above. There is also just the pervasive societal pressure of this that was there well before you were born. And while it might not have always looked or felt the way that it does now because of, social media and whatnot, um, part of what has been there for years and years is that we don't talk about what's really going on. If there are troubles at home, if there are difficulties in your family, that's something that was kept very private. So without doing like a full historical dive on this, I'm just making generalizations. Back in the day, the like comparing yourself to the Joneses is like an old timey type of American saying, I think. Or the grass is always greener in somebody else's yard, that kind of stuff. Those comparisons, that history of comparison came about because people weren't honest and open about what was actually happening. And again, at the time, there were a lot of societal reasons for that, that I'm sure shaped how and why people did that. Fine, great. The reasons are a little different now, but some of the reasons now are also curated, manufactured. So let's say if you're like living on the, plains of America somewhere and your neighbors, however many miles away, um, and you see them every once in a while, there's very little that you have to pull off of or that you would have had to pull off of to make a comparison. Like, okay, maybe they have a bigger farm than you, or they have more cattle, or their farming business is more successful. Um, those are comparisons that maybe could be made at that time. Um, Now, in our day and age, we are on social media a lot. which makes it feel like our neighbors are right up on top of us and that we can see everything that they're doing all the time, 24/7. Except for there's also a lot of, as I said, curated imagery. Nowadays, we have, nowadays in comparison to like old timey West or whatever, we have ads, we have commercials, we have movies, all of this stuff, and then social media with its um, kind of pervasive kind of look into other people's lives. It may feel like you're looking into other people's lives, but you're not entirely. We're just getting snapshots, we're getting glimpses, and sometimes we're getting props of what's happening in somebody else's life. We're not seeing all the times where they're actually crying. And while I think these days it is way more common to see somebody filming themselves crying, and that is an interesting thing in and of itself. We're not seeing everything. Maybe there is some more truth coming out there in social media about how difficult things are for people. That's great. Um, Everything is not being shared. And for just a brief moment, I want to put an asterisk next to, we are seeing some very, very real stuff about what is happening in our country and in other parts of the world, that is like more reality that you might feel like you can handle in any one moment. But and if that's not your lived experience right now, you're going to scroll through Instagram and then see, like, right after that, or TikTok or wherever you're scrolling, you might see these like horrific images. And then right after that, um, see some ad, see some video of like puppies and ducks playing together. And then you're taken out of that reality and into this other different, mm, maybe real imagery, real video, maybe not. So I'm not talking about that, like that reality of difficult stuff happening in the world we are exposed to. But when it comes to the like new parenthood comparison trap, um, you may be having an experience of looking through social media and seeing that somebody seems to be doing things better than you. Maybe they're working out, maybe they're baking from scratch or making food from their garden, or I don't know, whatever your thing is that makes you feel like less than, you're going to be seeing it on social media. But what happens is, like, we start to fill in the blanks. So we're getting the snapshot. Maybe we're on this page for 10, 15, 30 seconds or something, seeing this post. And whatever insecurities, let's say, we have, we start to fill in the blank. Okay, so Susan, let's say, is making her own sourdough bread from scratch. Okay. And that's what we're seeing on social media. And then you, just as an example, might start making associations like, oh, well, I don't do that. Maybe I should be doing that. Huh, I wonder how it would be to like start making sourdough bread from scratch. Okay. So there's like an initial comparison, but then you can go into other layers of this comparison. Well, like, when am I going to have time to do that? Or maybe I don't have the finances to invest in that. Um, or it could be that you also don't do your own gardening, or that you also don't do your own baking ever, and maybe you should. So this is just a generic example, but think of it for yourself. What are the things that you do, your dialogue internally, that you do when you see something on social media? What blanks do you start to fill in about ways that you are not like that person, or not like what they are doing? And it's hardly ever like, huh, okay, so Susan bakes her own sourdough. That's cool. And then move on. It's more often than not, huh, Susan makes her own sourdough and I'm not, and I should be. So the negative self-judgmental talk, and it's quick when it starts. It can just sneak in like so fast. And I mean, this could be in like seconds. And maybe you've started to scroll down a little bit more and you're now on to like, I don't know, some funny bear video. But what happens in those couple of seconds? Well, what it can feel like is you're starting to build a repository of things that you are not doing well enough. What can happen on social media in particular is that over a couple minutes, half an hour, or whatever of scrolling, if you've compared yourself enough times to what other people are doing, by the time you're in, by that couple minutes or half an hour, or however long it takes you, you start to feel worse and worse and worse to the point where maybe you're just starting to feel depressed. Um, or maybe you're feeling anxious from all of these things that you're not and that you're not doing. Um, and maybe you've started to feel sort of like frozen in place or stuck in the kind of depressive state. Not saying depression in particular, but like a depressive state of having just kind of beaten yourself up for however long. And I know this is the experience of a lot of people, but you might not be clocking that that is what is happening to you. That okay, you're starting to feel worse and worse. But why? Because it's not like you're just watching some movie or something on a screen and having no internal response to it. You're having an internal response, and the comparison starts to wear down on you. The judgment, the beating yourself up, the wishing you could or should or would, all of that starts to make you feel bad. So the next time you're on social media and you're scrolling through, I just encourage anybody who's doing that, just take a minute and notice. Notice how you're feeling. Notice how you feel when you first open the phone or computer. Maybe you're going in there even to like zone out, or just to mindlessly numb scroll your way through something. Like maybe you're going into it already in a depressed or anxious state. Take note of that. And then if you start to feel worse, take note of that. Like, how are you interacting with yourself while you're interacting with social media? And if you are seeing that it's making you feel depressed or making you feel anxious, turn it off, put it down, look out the window, go do something else, shake it off, like literally do jumping jacks, try and shake it out of your system, shake it off your body. And note to yourself that, okay, this is having an impact on me. Um, it can, like I said, it can be having this like cumulative effect where you're having this holding zone, this repository of ways that you feel bad about yourself. And it can, if you're not aware that it's happening and not aware that it's kind of queued up in your system, the next time you go on an app or something, it's like there, just right below the surface, waiting to be called up again for you to feel bad all over again. And, I'm not saying social media is all bad. I'm just really specifically speaking to this experience of feeling worse and doing the social comparison in a way that makes you feel worse. There are great things about social media. Absolutely. Ways that people feel connected and seen and can socialize and all that. So, um, just to clarify, because it's not all bad. But if you are somebody who's already depressed, already feeling anxious, you're a new parent, and you have this vulnerability of being in a new phase of life, a transition into parenting and parenthood, and you like don't know what you're doing. And that's fine and normal. Like nobody knows what they're doing. That's the big secret. Nobody knows. But then you go onto um, a social media platform, and the algorithm, in whatever weird magic, dark magic, I don't know, that it does, it starts to notice what you're noticing. So all of a sudden, let's say you've got 15 different parenting experts telling you how to do stuff. And maybe some of it resonates for you, maybe some of it doesn't. But if you're in a vulnerable state and you don't know what works for you yet, you're going to maybe feel like you need to do all of it and then feel like you're not doing well at any of it. So it's important, if you're going to be interacting in these platforms, you yourself interacting with it, not even necessarily engaging, like making comments, having dialogue. You are interacting with um, the screen. And in some ways, that screen ends up being a way that we project ourselves onto. Sometimes, oftentimes, it's our insecurities are projected onto this thing. It's not meant to do that, but that's how it ends up being for some people. And that, yeah, going back to Susan's sourdough bread, like she's just in her kitchen making sourdough bread, happy to be making sourdough bread, let's say. But you might be putting stuff out there onto the image, meaning your internal stuff gets projected out onto this idea of what Susan is doing. Like you should be doing better somehow because you're not doing what she's doing. So it's just a really important thing to take note of. If you're starting to feel worse, there might be a reason. And it might be that some of your internal dialogue is coming from some of the insecurities that you hold, that are now being like doubled down on social media. It's just, I just see it impacting so many people. And in particular, I'm mostly talking to new moms, pregnant or postpartum, or even moms that are, into toddlerhood and beyond. That this still happens. And it's not just social media. This can be in friend circles. This can be with peers. This can be with family members that you're doing the comparison game. And usually, anytime we're doing this comparison, we're seeing a snapshot of somebody else's life and usually comparing our worst, what feels like our worst, to what looks like their best. So there's a mismatch for one, in like you are not comparing apples to apples. And also, you can't really, anyways, side note. But we're seeing this like, um, small sliver portion of somebody else's life, and we're assuming that we are not living up to some standard that they are able to uphold. And it is toxic. It is, um, so depressing to live in that state for any bit of time, but to be in that state of mind, to always feel like you're not doing enough. um, you know, this, as I mentioned before, there could be a lot of reasons why this feeling comes up for you. I find, I think just because by nature of therapy, and being a therapist, I find that a lot of this is connected to earlier life stuff. So, ways in which you might not feel good enough, could be related to that pressure of perfection that you internalized somewhere along the line. It could be like, related to people pleasing, feeling like you should be doing more stuff in order to make you good enough for other people. And yeah, I'm not going to go into all of the examples, but suffice to say that while you're here, again, I'm just going to use the either your peer relationships or social media, while you're here experiencing this in the moment comparison of I'm not good enough to Susan for her bread making skills, it's not just right now that's being called up. It's not just like, oh, yeah, I should be a better bread maker. I should be better at hobbies or whatever. It's oftentimes that there is also a string connected to experiences that you've had along the way that are now coming up, might not necessarily be coming up fully in your full conscious awareness, but old feelings can come up, old experiences of having this feeling can come up. And so, some of the reasons that it can feel so deep and so difficult is that you're not just experiencing this moment of feeling not good enough. You're also feeling the depth of all of these other times that you felt not good enough. And it gets really overwhelming, really overwhelming. I think bringing an awareness to these dynamics that it could be impacting you this way, that the comparison with your peers or friends or family or social media could have a real impact on you. And so, what do you do? Well, in the immediate, you can just limit how much time you're on social media. Um, as I said before, you can also bring into your awareness that these things, um, that you are being impacted, that you're starting to feel worse, you're starting to feel depressed, you're starting to feel anxious. You might even feel like sort of frozen in that you can't not keep scrolling, um, because you're just stuck in the feeling of feeling bad. Um, there are ways to set time limits. You can set time limits on your phone, you can set time limits on apps. You can also make agreements with yourself that if you start feeling bad about yourself, then you put it down. Like setting your own boundaries and limits on it are helpful. And outside of that, one of the main things to remember is that what you're comparing to, again, is just a sliver of somebody else's reality at that moment. It's not a full story, it's not their full truth. More likely than not, they do not have themselves together. They are not doing all of the things all of the time. And you can cut yourself some slack. You are living your own life. You are in your own process. You are on your own learning curve. And while there might be some things that are helpful from social media that you can glean and learn from, this is not it. This is not where you're going to find yourself. This is not where you're going to be like affirmed in yourself necessarily. Um, there might be some deeper work to do. There might be some therapeutic work that could be helpful for you to heal through some of these older wounds that keep feeding this insecurity. And another asterisk to this, people have insecurities. I'm not saying that you should never have insecurities and it's all bad to have that. What I'm saying is that how much is it impacting you? You also have a choice in how you're interacting with social media, how you're talking to yourself in your head, uh, about what you're seeing on social, how you're relating to friends or family. You have choices here. You don't have to continue beating yourself up. And you might not believe me. You might take some real convincing to get out of this pattern that you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have it all figured out. It is really okay to not know everything. It is really okay to get comfortable with not being perfect because it's not going to happen. Like that, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If perfection is the goal, then failure is your option. It's not going to get there. So the more comfortable we can get with, like, yeah, I'm human. I'm going to have times where I don't know what I'm doing, and that's okay. And it's normal. The better off we will be. When we can loosen those constraints for ourselves, it just makes life so much easier. Like you don't have to constantly be improving. You don't have to constantly be like on yourself about something. Like it's okay to just be and to not compare yourself to everyone around you. So that's my soapbox. That's my PSA for today. Please just be kinder to yourself. And if you feel like the comparison trap, the comparison game is bringing you down, really think about what's going on there and what you can do to help yourself feel better. Anyhow, I thank you for being with me today. And I hope this has been helpful for you. Alrighty. See you next time.